Notwithstanding clause. Notwithstanding clause in the Charter is one of two ways in which governments can, in fact, act so as to limit what are otherwise the rights that are guaranteed, supposedly guaranteed, through the Charter for individuals. There are two routes. One is the Section 1 declaration, which is the possibility of a government acting in a way that might limit a charter right if it does so in a way that is done clearly through the law and is demonstrably justifiable in a free and democratic society. That is written into the Charter as it exists right now. That's separate from the notwithstanding or non obstante clause. What it means is that even though there might be some infringement of a charter right, if the government can show, and it's up to the government to show that on clear terms, that a free and democratic society can live with this charter limitation, then they can do so. And the Supreme Court of Canada has, in 1986, in the Regina versus Oakes case, enunciated the kinds of tests that a government would have to meet in order to show that there's an appropriate limitation. That's one form of limitation that leads some scholars to say we have a constitutional but not an entrenched charter. The other aspect, of course, is the possibility of a notwithstanding clause. That is, it is always open to this legislature, to any provincial legislature, to the federal parliament, to make a declaration when it enacts a law that it is to operate notwithstanding certain sections of the Charter. What that means is that there is built into the Charter, and this was part of the original political compromise that led to the endorsement of the Charter in the first place, the possibility that we, the elected representatives, can have the final say. It's a question of who do you think should have the final say, the courts as the interpreters of the Charter or the elected officials? And the political compromise of the time led to a structure called the notwithstanding clause. So we do have that power. It's not been used in Nova Scotia. The federal parliament has never used it. The Quebec legislature used it in order to overrule or essentially nullify a court ruling that had limited its ability through a statute. That is, I think many people will recall Bill 178 that was designed to advance the position of the French language and its use inside Quebec. But the use of the notwithstanding clause is more theoretical than actual. It simply has not been used a great deal, and when it has been used, it's been highly controversial. It's a highly political matter. Some scholars have suggested that instead of legislatures or parliaments actually having a notwithstanding clause, there might be an opportunity for a referendum and actually put a question to the public to decide if something should override the Charter. There's a possibility, who knows. I think we have to take it simply that we have a notwithstanding clause, we have a Section 1, and there are certain kind of limitations that are already built in. But in the end, the framers of the Charter decided that it's elected legislatures and elected parliaments that in the end are really going to be the arbiters of what it is that we ought to see as the appropriate modes of protection of rights in our country. What are the rights that are protected? Well, there are political rights, there are legal rights, there are rights of fundamental fairness, and there are rights of equality. These are all very important things to find in the Charter. By political rights, I mean such things as the right to vote. And the right to vote is not just a right to cast a ballot. The right to vote has been interpreted by the courts as extending to being a bulwark against gerrymandering. A very important protection for us. Legal rights often have to do with our people's encounters with the criminal justice system, and of course there have been a number of cases that have established limits on police powers, limits on intrusion, freedom of certain kinds of freedoms of privacy, rights to counsel, and so on. Fundamental freedoms, these are crucial. They have to do with freedom of the press and freedom of religion and freedom of speech and freedom of assembly. I think all of us endorse these and are happy that they're to be found in the Charter of Rights. The equality rights, of course, have as enunciated in Section 15, formed a good basis of some of the litigation, but they've offered protections to individuals who have been part of groups that have been historically the victims of some form of prejudice. And I think we're happy to find in our Charter, again, the kinds of protections that those sections of the Charter offer to people. Generally, in Nova Scotia, I think when we turn our minds to what's happened here, we have a good record. We have not been a province where there's been a huge amount of charter litigation. Not too many of our laws have been overturned, although some have. We've been a place in which some of the criminal process matters have come forward. We've had some problems with some of our election laws, or indeed some of the other bills that have come before this House. There's been litigation about the entitlement of benefits for same-sex couples. There have been a variety of things that have been of interest around the country, and we haven't been far out of line, I think, with how it is that we've been called to account when it comes to measuring our laws against the Charter. I know that when the Charter first came into effect, there was an initiative, particularly after 1985, when Section 15, which was the one delayed section of the Charter, came into effect. We examined our laws with the view to trying to bring them into line with the Charter. It may be time now, after 25 years of our experience with charter litigation, to think again in an organized fashion about all of our laws, to try to see in the light of the extended jurisprudence that we now have whether we really are complying with the Charter as extensively as we might. That would be a useful exercise, and I commend it to my colleague, the Honourable the Minister of Justice. I hope that he turns his mind to the possibility of doing this even as an informal exercise. Well, what of the future? What is it we're likely to see in terms of the future when it comes to the development of the Charter? Now, I have to say that we have already engaged in a number of controversial issues through charter litigation. The courts have found themselves in a difficult position of having to sort out what in many respects are very difficult social issues over the years. Not always happily, I have to say. There's an interesting record of the Supreme Court of Canada and other levels of courts when it comes to deciding what issues are charter issues, what issues are charter protected, and exactly how the charter protections are to be worked out. Most controversial, of course, has been the most recent Supreme Court of Canada decision in Shauli that had to do with the extent of the protections offered to individuals through the Charter and through, in this case, the Quebec Charter when it comes to the ambit of our healthcare system. This was a very difficult case and one in which the court members split many ways in terms of setting out their views. Shauli, I think, has been a very unfortunate decision for us to struggle with. It's put the Supreme Court of Canada in a difficult light because they had a record in previous decisions of trying to either stay out of the most controversial of issues or else to act only where they had clear evidentiary bases that would allow them to move in a particular direction. And many scholars have criticized the Shauli decision as not being as grounded in factual and learned bases as one would expect. So we don't know where the court is going to go with its grappling with our healthcare system. But there are other issues that will play out over time. I'm curious, for example, as to whether Section 15 will be interpreted ultimately as extending to protecting people who are in a position of poverty. That is to say, will Section 15 be read as extending to the issue of class, along with the enunciated, specified grounds that are prohibited for discrimination? Poverty and class are not listed. They would have to be analyzed by the courts on a basis that suggested that being poor is similar to other forms of historic grounds of discrimination. But the groundwork is there, the factual groundwork is there, and some cases are beginning to work their way up through the system. We may find that at some point the court will move in that direction. I want to note in closing just one other initiative that is sometimes mentioned as a possible change to our charter. Many people think that property rights should be entrenched in our charter. Now, a particular focused decision was taken when the charter was drafted not to include property rights. And that's been a defining distinction between us and the United States when it comes to a difference between their Bill of Rights, which is a variety of sections in their Constitution, and our charter. Should we adopt something that looks like the American protection of property rights? We have to ask ourselves, when people speak about protecting property rights in the Charter, what exactly they mean. Do they mean that the government cannot expropriate your land without compensation? If they mean only that, that might not be such a bad thing. On the other hand, we know from the existence of the equivalent kind of section in the U.S. Bill of Rights, it's in their Fifth Amendment, that the courts have interpreted this in quite a large and liberal way, and in fact, with great favor to private property owners. We have a potential for a lot of change in our laws if we move exactly in that direction. Mr. Speaker, I see that unfortunately my time has expired, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you. The honourable member for Pictou West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I too am pleased to have a few minutes here before we go into budget estimates today to speak about the riding of Pictou West, the area that I represent here in the legislature, and to talk about some of the positive things that are happening there, and I guess also some of the challenges that we face in the months and years to come in that riding. But first of all, I want to say it's a privilege certainly to represent Pictou West here in the legislature, and I've had this opportunity now for 3 terms and in more than 5 years representing the people of the town of Pictou and River John, Scottsburn, West Branch, Mount Tom, Alma, Durham, many other rural communities in and around the town of Pictou, including the Pictou Island just offshore in the Northumberland Strait. And as I mentioned, Mr. Speaker, it's a privilege and certainly a responsibility that I take seriously. So to tell you a little bit about the riding of Pictou West, as all of Nova Scotia, it was inhabited first by the Mi'kmaq people, and then with the start of the European settlement in the 17th century, I think it was first the Acadian French that inhabited Pictou County, and then the Irish, and I guess our strongest influence certainly has been the Scottish settlement throughout northern Nova Scotia. And with farming and fishing and forestry being some of our primary industries, and very important to our settlement in the early years, and as time went on, manufacturing, and certainly today also tourism is vital to our economy. And Mr. Speaker, our Scottish heritage is certainly strongly reflected in Pictou West as you look around at some of the stone buildings that exist in both town and county. As you know, Pictou is well known for the ship Hector and the Heritage Quay on the waterfront there. And we also have the Hector Exhibit Center and the Thomas McCullough House, known for its genealogical research. The Exhibit Center, the Hector, is known also for traveling exhibits that come and go in our county. And I should mention just last Thursday night, we held a successful Tartan Day there, and also the opening of the International Gathering of the Clans. So there was a good crowd, and all those that were Scots or wish they were Scots were there, I think, that evening. Town of Pictou also showcases the Cost Entertainment Center, now for more than 20 years, bringing in quality entertainment, and also the Fisheries Museum, the Northumberland Fisheries Museum, which is presently undergoing an expansion and going to be relocated on the waterfront next to the Ship Hector and the Heritage Quay there, but certainly showcases the importance of our fishing industry in northern Nova Scotia. We also have a number of summer festivals that draw people from far and wide. Just to mention a few of them, the Pictou Lobster Carnival brings in thousands of people every summer to the town of Pictou. The Hector Festival, New Scotland Days in September, River John Festival Days put on a great show in that community in late July. And of course our Pictou North Colchester exhibition that showcases our agricultural industry throughout the area. As I mentioned, Mr. Speaker, tourism is increasingly important, and it's warm beaches, beautiful scenery, friendly people, all bring people to Pictou County, and while they're there, there's some accommodations that are quality that they can stay, and I'm sure perhaps some members in this House have stayed over at Stoneham Lodge, which is near Scottsburn, and a good quality institution, certainly good hospitality. Pictou Lodge, just outside the town of Pictou in Brayshore, also well known as a quality overnight accommodation. And a number of inns and beds and breakfasts and that keep people in the area. Our major employers, Mr. Speaker, would certainly be Michelin Tire, Nina Paper, McKay Meters, North Nova Seafoods, and many other smaller and medium-sized businesses, including Scotsburn Cooperative Services. So, Mr. Speaker, that's a little flavor on Pictou West and on some of our positives, and now I want to turn to some of our challenges that we have in our county and in particular in Pictou West. I would be remiss, Mr. Speaker, if I didn't first of all mention as a challenge just the announcement last week of the closure of Trenton Works and the impact that is having on our local economy. And since 1872, we've had steel fabrication of one form or another in our county, and it's a real blow to have that plant closed down and to be phased out. And while it's not the news that we were hoping for last week, you know, they say behind every dark cloud is a silver lining, and I guess we're hopeful that with the federal and provincial governments will come together and work with our Regional Development Commission, work with the company, work with the unionized workforce, and see if it's possible to rejuvenate or bring something else there in steel fabrication. And we do have a good modern plant. We have a quality workforce, and I would hope the province would leave no stone unturned to find a solution there to see what other opportunities are available. And certainly, as we know, recently the company did have some contracts from Alberta in steel fabrication, and so there's a lot of possibilities. And whether a new owner, or a private owner, or a joint venture, or even some type of cooperative with the union might be possible there, Mr. Speaker. So I would encourage government to look at all possibilities and see if we can rejuvenate Trenton Works once again. Mr. Speaker, I want to turn now to some of the other challenges that we face in Pictou West, and first of all around infrastructure. And one item that we really need in all of rural Nova Scotia, but certainly in communities like River John and Tony River and Glengarry and other parts of the riding, would be high-speed internet. And it's a real boon to keeping people in a rural community. It helps local businesses, and there's a number of requests I've had over the last couple of years to bring high-speed internet to these rural communities. And while I know the government has promised by the end of 2009 that this will become reality, it seems slow in getting off the ground. And while we know there's a pilot project in Cumberland County with 33 months to go before that commitment time, we're very hopeful that all rural communities will have that in place before the end of 2009. The other infrastructure need, Mr. Speaker, is certainly around secondary roads, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention some of the problems with secondary roads in Pictou West. And many of these roads, Mr. Speaker, are truly unacceptable. They're potholed, they're cracked, they're heaved, they're broken, there's asphalt missing on the shoulders are falling away, and really they're damaging our vehicles. And drivers are paying the cost of these poor quality roads. And it's the roads that we live on, it's the roads that we drive on every day, it's the roads that we go to school on or go to work, go to church or go to visit our family and friends. These are the roads that we're using all the time, and they're the ones that's causing the most problems. And if you end up with a broken tie rod end or a lost muffler or a damaged rim, then you're paying for that at the service shop at the cost of repairing your vehicle. So what we need, Mr. Speaker, really is a plan from this government to fix our rural roads and really to fix the worst roads first. And we need a priority system that will determine which roads are the worst, and those are the ones that absolutely should be fixed first in line. So I'll mention a couple of the roads that I think have been long neglected in Pictou West, and I would start with the River John Road. It's one of the worst out there. It runs off the Sunrise Trail and out through Sundridge and Hodson and ends up at Lee Tick's Chinese restaurant in the village of River John. But it's in very poor shape. Likewise, the old Pictou Road, the Mountain Road near River John, and also the Cape John Road. The West Branch Road, which we're hoping to have completed certainly this year, and they're all in extremely poor condition. And tourism is hurt, Mr. Speaker, when roads are neglected or not looked after like they should be. And I've heard that from tourism operators that I'd mentioned previously, the Stoneham Chalets and the Pictou Lodge owners have both mentioned the poor quality roads are hurting business, and patrons are saying they may not return if the roads are not repaired. Also, emergency response time is hindered by emergency vehicles like a fire truck or an ambulance or even a police car if they're traveling down the road and the road is slowing them back in getting to a fire or to an accident. I can think of roads like the Division Road near Pictou, Bayview Road, Central Caribou Road, Green Hill, Millbrook Road, White Hill Road. I could go on. There's several that are in poor shape. And there's even very heavily traveled roads like the Granton Road past the Michelin tire plant, or the Abercrombie Road down by Nina Paper, the Old Truro Highway, Westville Road, and so on. So there's no end to the number of roads I could mention, Mr. Speaker, but that's a few that I know that need some serious attention, and I would hope government would look upon it as an investment, as really an economic enabler that would add value to our rural communities. And if good quality roads will attract new business and new families to an area, and it makes sense to keep them in good shape. A couple other issues, Mr. Speaker, in the time I have remaining that I want to talk about that are challenges in our communities. Community schools, very important, again, an economic enabler for an area. And people look upon a community school as really the heart and soul of that community. And I think of elementary schools in my riding of Salt Springs and Scottsburn and River John, Lions Brook and Pictou. And these are vital, and it draws people to an area when they have a good quality school. And it's a center of activity where people come together, and not just to get their children educated, but for community meetings or for outreach activities or sports events. It's a center of a community in many ways. So I would hope that the Department of Education can look upon these community schools as something that they can build upon rather than looking at school closures. It should be really an enhancement. What can they add to the community school to make it better? Is it a compatible business or a daycare center or seniors housing or whatever that would help alleviate the cost of that facility and add value to the community rather than removing it altogether? A couple other issues quickly, Mr. Speaker. I think we need some incentives for our farming and fishing communities. In particular, I was disappointed to see the industry liaison officers for farming were taken out of the, or very much on slow track, not in the budget, and as promised from the election last year. And we need some help to get young people back into farming and into fishing. And we need to ensure that those primary industries remain viable and important to our rural communities. Finally, I'll mention a couple of environmental issues. I would encourage Service Nova Scotia and the government in general to do all they can to ensure that the Pictou Lions Brook sewer project becomes a reality. I know the announcement last year, but it seems to be pretty slow getting off the mark, and that would help both the town and the county, and it would perhaps alleviate some of the problem with the West River estuary, and in the Lions Brook area there's been problems there with odor and siltation, and this might be a first step to alleviate some of those environmental difficulties. And finally, I'll mention, Mr. Speaker, around wind power or green power. Everybody's in favor of it, but there's some concerns over setback distances and from primary residences or from homes, and while everybody wants to see the alternate energy move forward, nobody wants it right on their immediate backyard, and we really need a setback distance that's, I guess, a happy medium that looks after the landowners in an area, looks after permanent homes in an area, and still allows alternate energy to move forward. There are some health care issues that I guess I don't have time for today, Mr. Speaker, but another day we'll talk about those. And so with that, Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the opportunity to have a few minutes here to talk about Pictou West, and we'll continue in this role. And again, it's a privilege to be able to serve the people of this riding. Thank you.
Motion is carried. The House shall now resolve itself in the Committee of Whole House on Supply. The Committee on Supply will now be called to order. The acting Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would you call the estimates of the Minister of Education?
The estimates for the Minister of Education. Thank you. The Chair will now recognize the honourable member for Hants East.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the Minister for an opportunity to ask some questions regarding her department. I guess one of the first questions I'd like to have clarified is around the change in the birth date for allowing students to enter grade primary, which I think is extended to December 31st, if I'm to be 5 by December 31st. I guess I'm curious as to the reason the government moved to this. What I've heard around research on students that younger is not always better in terms of the program that they enter. So I'm wondering if the minister's determination is that they will stop the pre-primary program in order to, by extending the date that children could enter grade primary. In other words, they'd be younger entering grade primary. So I just wonder if the minister could clarify for me about the future of the pre-primary program, because I have seen that, or thought that to be a pretty good fit for preparing children for entering primary. And so I'm just wondering what the future holds for that program.
Thank you. The Honourable the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the question, and appreciate the opportunity to have questions from fellow educators. I just want to talk a little bit about the pre-primary, and as you know, it was a 2-year pilot. There's a whole body of research out there that supports early learning and the advantages to early learning. And so, therefore, it was piloted, and it's been monitored very closely as we've moved through the 2 years. And the report that has been prepared gives us a pretty clear indication that, yes, what the research has said is true. The early childhood workers who are providing the instruction and leadership in those classes, they're telling us that students are adapting very well to the school environment, to some structure, although it's a play-directed program. The curriculum that is used was developed by our own staff with early childhood expertise. And so the reports are that, yes, the curriculum is appropriate. Students, 4-year-olds, are adapting well to that. And the results that come back from the questions to the primary teachers, who now are working with that first group, are saying that, yes, the state of readiness is much more advanced, and those are all good reasons to continue that program. For that reason, we have extended it to the 3rd year in all of the 19 sites. At the same time, there were some challenges with that, and the fact that it was voluntary and that transportation was the responsibility of the parent identified a weakness to the program, and that is that those children, those 4-year-olds who maybe could benefit best from that program, were not in a home situation where maybe transportation could be provided. So that would be a downside to having it as voluntary, and transportation the responsibility of the parent. Along with the whole pre-primary pilot came the interest, which comes back quite frequently in education, and that is the date of entry. And there is only one other province across the province that doesn't have late year, early year entry, whether it's December or January 1. We kind of stood out alone with one other province as being in September. So we looked at, if we change that entry date to end of September, being 5 by the end of December, we would facilitate that transient population, the military families and so on that are moving across Canada. And so students would not be disadvantaged if they moved into an area where there was a different date of entry. And so the question was, do we do both, or do we do either, or do we do none? And what we came up with was a recommendation, and it's in the budget, to extend the pre-primary for 1 more year, because all of the evidence says that it is a good program, and students are better prepared for primary after having gone through that. However, we also recognize the importance of changing the date of entry. So that's why we presented it the way it is, that we will continue the pre-primary for 1 more year. And in September of 2008, the change of entry date will be changed. So we will have 4-year-olds, we could have 4-year-olds in our schools for September, October, November, December, and turning 5 at the end of December. So we will capture that that 4-year-old age group that does take well to that pre-primary, preschool instruction, and we'll have them in the primary those 3 months earlier. With any age of entry date, it is the parents' responsibility to make a decision whether they feel their children are ready to go to school. They have to be in school by age 6, but they don't have to be in school by age 4. And so we're just changing the entry date. Parents can keep their children home until they're 5. Some parents keep their children home until they're 6. So it's not compulsory that they start then, but the opportunity and the option is there. So that's kind of why we've extended the pre-primary, recognizing it's good for those 4-year-olds, changing the entry date to meet some of those other demands and some of those other concerns. And at this point, we will discontinue the pre-primary after the 3rd year and have the change of entry date. However, if I could go on, recognizing that that it is important to capture those 4-year-olds, I've already been in discussion with my colleague from Community Services to say this is a good program, the evidence is there, the curriculum is there. Is there any way we can work with Community Services to take that kind of a model through so that we can implement it through some other department to capture the 4-year-olds?
Thank you. The honourable member from Hanseas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Minister. I would appreciate it, I guess, if the Minister could elaborate a little bit on her thoughts around what they would implement through another department. I guess I'm trying to see the fit of having students who basically now would have a choice if they were going to be 5 as of the end of December. I guess my question should be, at what age can they enter a pre-primary program presently?
Thank you. The Honourable the Minister of Education.
The same, Mr. Chair, to the member, the same entry date is the same for pre-primary as it is for public school right now. So if they wanted to go into the pre-primary, they had to be 4 by October 1. To enter public school right now, they have to be 5 by October 1.
Thank you. The honourable member from Hanseas.
Thank you. So what we're saying for the next year then, does that mean that they could be 4 by December 31st to enter the pre-primary? They'd be 3. They'd be 3 until December 31st. So could they enter a pre-primary program for this next year that it's being offered?
Thank you. The Honourable the Minister of Education.
Mr. Chair, to the member opposite, the pre-primary pilot will be, as it now exists, will be terminated before we have the change of entry date for primary. So in answer to your question, no. However, if we continue to work with Community Services and look at some kind of a model, details would have to be worked out as to where, when, and how, but we just don't want to lose a good idea. So at this point, there's just preliminary discussions about how we might follow up with another department.
Thank you. The honourable member for Hanseas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so I'm curious, I guess, what the minister would envision about the program if it was to be something worked out with Community Services or some other department. What is it that the minister's thinking, and what would the people who are presently teachers of the pre-primary program, would they still be teachers? Like, would they have to have teacher qualifications if they come under Community Services? And so, what kind of thoughts do you have on what this model, I guess, would look like?
Thank you. The Honourable the Minister of Education.
Yes, Mr. Chair, to the member opposite. We know right now that we have early childhood educators who are working in our pre-primary. They have specialized training, and that model seems to be working very well. If they were to move into the public school system, they would have to become members of the teachers union, and they would have to have a teacher training program. But if they were to continue in an early childhood environment that would be outside of public schools, that may not be as much of an issue. It would be an issue if it had gone into public schools beyond the pilot. But one of the things that we're looking at is communities where there are daycares, and some communities have daycares and they're accessible, but there are some communities that do not. And again, the issue of not all students who should be involved in a structured program can be. So there's a lot of detail here to work out, and I wouldn't want to go too far as to what that will look like, except to say that the research tells us it's good and we shouldn't lose it.
Thank you. The honourable member for Henseys.
Thank you, Minister. Yeah, I agree. If I think certainly all of us who are educators recognize that those early interventions pay dividends. In other words, that the sooner you can intervene, then it will cost less in the system down the road. And so I'm certainly someone, if the evidence would indicate that doing this sooner is a good thing for students, then I would encourage that. I think probably my last question, unless your answer generates another one, would be, since I recognize a lot of details would have to be worked out, I'm just curious as to if a similar program was developed in conjunction with community services, would the access to the program increase? In other words, would it just be 19? Would it be more schools? Actually, it wouldn't even be schools, I guess. And the other question would be, where would it occur? I mean, I'm assuming there's no extra space in many schools to extend the age for entering primary, so you're going to have an increase in number of students anyway. And so I'm just curious as to where you see this occurring, and I mean physically occurring. And so if you could address those.
Thank you.
What your thoughts are on those.
Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Chair, to the member opposite, one of the things that we do not want to do is compete with the private daycare operators that are out there. And we have some excellent ones, and they have early childhood educators who are working in those and providing those opportunities. So before there was any decision made as to the locations, the communities as well as within the community, we would want to work very closely with those daycare operators to make sure that, because our goal is to make sure that there is a program available in a community and students and 4-year-olds can access that. So there'd have to be a complete review of where those currently exist, what communities, and then within the community. Again, and you've made a good point, that sometimes the schools, the facility is filled to capacity and cannot accommodate them. In other places, we know we have rambling space for all kinds of 4-year-olds. So that kind of an assessment would have to be done too. But we do know that when a 4-year-old program is housed in a public school, that it has happened with success. So the whole business of 19 pilots would not drive any further decisions about where. It would be based on the facilities that are available, a community need, and how we could best deliver a program, and not to be in competition with the private operators.
Thank you. The honourable member for Henseys.
Thank you, Minister. I want to thank the chair. I wonder if I can ask the chair how much time I have left, if he can tell me what that half hour we talked about.
You have approximately 15 minutes. Yeah.
Good, great. I wonder if I can get one of the pages to deliver this to the Minister, please. Thank you. Yeah. Minister, I want to ask a question. It's based on the information in this email that I have, and I'm not going to read it, although I thought that might be a simple way for me to try to convey the message. But I'm going to try to do it on my understanding of the problem. Of a gentleman who was in the manufacturing, engineering, machinist technician program, and I guess the cusp of the problem is his instruction was by machinists. Actually, people who would have educated machinists, who would have gone on to maybe write their exam as machinists in the Red Seal certification. But anyway, this gentleman thinks that if he wrote the exam for Red Seal, that he would pass it. But the department says he's not allowed to do that. Actually, they're saying that he's not allowed to do that because of the program that he took, and I think he tries to outline the similarities in the two programs. But also, if he did do it, which seems like an odd statement to make in the sense that the department is saying that the difference in the cost, it would cost him $500 and some to write the exam, whereas someone who took the machinist program would write it for $100, if I have that understanding right. So anyway, I know that, I don't know if this would be right at the tip of your tongue responding to this, but anyway, without getting through all the particulars right at this point, I'm just wondering if the minister or her staff could enlighten us as to the problem, I guess, in why someone who was willing to pay for an exam and willing to write it, he's finding that the training he has, basically the job opportunities are not there, and the pay level certainly isn't what he was expecting, and he thinks his level of training it makes him competent enough to pass the exam for Red Seal, and he'd just like to have an opportunity to do that. So I know that's kind of a broad stroke, so if the minister could respond.
Thank you. The Honourable the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the member opposite. I'm not as familiar with this situation as you are, having just seen the correspondence a couple of minutes ago. But what I will make a commitment to do is to review the particulars of this one, and perhaps if I could get back to the member to talk about the detail and try to provide support and direction for this particular person, so they will be clear on what they have to do. That's okay with the member?
Thank you. The Honourable the member for Henseys.
I want to say thanks to the minister, and I want to apologize for giving you kind of a lot of information in such a short period of time. If I had it sooner, I'd have delivered it sooner, so that I maybe could have asked the minister the question, and she would have had some time to give me a response. But certainly, my interest in this, I guess, comes from a couple of areas. One is this gentleman was a former student of mine when I was a teacher, and so always, teachers are always interested in seeing their students kind of move upward and onward and progress. And so when he approached me on this, I was quite interested, but also interested in the need for. I know that we have a shortage of skilled vocational people or skilled workers, and actually I think the few that we had have been very quickly drawn westward, unless they're really well established in a particular occupation and are committed, I suppose, in a number of ways to family and mortgage and whatever here in the east that might keep them, but certainly trying to keep skilled workers in Nova Scotia is a challenge, and this is an individual who I think would like to stay if at all possible. So I would appreciate when the minister has another day or so to have somebody take a look at this, if they can give me a more detailed analysis actually, and that I can get back to this gentleman. But certainly I'm hoping to be more in the positive look, that if his training is such that they would agree that he could pass or he could write the exam, and has enough background certainly to write it, and hopefully in his case that he would pass it. And I guess I'm leading up to another question, and if the minister doesn't run into this very often, she may not have turned her mind to it, but I'm curious as to why the department wouldn't look at this, in terms of our skilled shortage and ways of getting people who have who have worked in particular areas and have accumulated a fair bit of knowledge, that maybe there's a possibility that they would be able to write a test and get certified in that particular area, depending on, that they may have not have had all the classroom, but so I'm just wondering if that has come across the minister's desk before, and if the department has looked at ways to certify people, with more training perhaps than the academic, than the classroom side, and try to come up with a balance of those two.
Thank you. The Honourable, the Minister of Education.
Yes, Mr. Chair, to the member opposite, to go back to the first situation, we will review that, but we have taken a number of steps to try to monitor the relationship between supply and demand, in particular in the skilled workers and trades area, working closely with business and industry, because for a couple of reasons. We need to know what the needs are so we can work with our community colleges or other areas to design programs to meet the need. We also have to look, so that's capturing people who don't have the training, providing opportunities, seats at the community college to give them skills in the trades where there will be jobs when they graduate. So that's an important link, and that our skills and learning division at the department, that has been a priority for them, because we recognize that we're losing that workforce. We're losing it partly because of age and retirement, but also the draw to other provinces. So we're very cognizant of that. Along with that is what we do to support the current workforce that we have. And you will recall the amendments to the Trades and Apprenticeship Act, where we talked about the Certificate of Proficiency. And that was to make sure that those people who are out there working their trade have not gotten the red seal, but do want an opportunity to show that they can do the job for whatever reason, whether it's through language barriers or literacy barriers or whatever, haven't gone for that certification. So we've provided an opportunity there to help those people get the certification, which will allow them, of course, to have a better rate of pay based on doing the same kind of work that they're currently doing. So that's another step we've taken. But with all of that, and with the situation that you bring to my attention, we assess individual concerns on an individual basis. And this one will be one of those. But if someone comes forward with something that's unique and they don't particularly fall under any one particular set of guidelines, we've made a commitment to, and we are open to sitting down to look at the specifics of that individual case. So we recognize that we have a critical part to play in the Department of Education, and as I've said on other occasions, it's probably one of the most active divisions within the department, more active than in the past, because there is that demand out there. So we're working with the community colleges to provide programs. We're working with business and industry to tell us what skills they want their workers to have. We're working with the current workers to make sure they get a certificate, whether it's proficiency or red seal. And then if somebody doesn't fall within one of those categories, we do the individual assessment of their particular needs and how we can help navigate them to a training program or to a certification program.
Thank you. The Honourable Member for Henseys.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted the Minister to clarify for me the notion with the Certificate of Proficiency. If my memory is correct, I believe that didn't require an exam. You could get that Certificate of Proficiency without writing an exam. Am I right on that?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Chairman, to the member opposite, yes. The details around the Certificate of Proficiency was to try to judge people and assess them based on their hands-on performance. So there would be, it would not be a written test, it would be a hands-on demonstration of their skills.
Thank you. The Honourable Member for Henseys.
I want to thank the Minister. Well, certainly, if the department would go down that road, then definitely for someone who was interested in writing a test, I think they would really consider that as well. I want to move on in my last couple of minutes. The Elmsdale District School, I think the Minister would be fairly familiar with that building. It's on McMillan Drive. If my knowledge of the present situation is correct. McMillan Drive is a municipal road. I think it's been petitioned for a program whereby the residents will pay the lion's share, 90%, to have that paved. But the issue I want to draw to the minister's attention is around sidewalks. That's quite a hike from the number 2 highway into the school there. I'm not exactly sure of that distance, but I know that residents have complained about the unsafe walking for children if they walk in that road to the school. So I want to make a case to the minister, and I know safety for students, I think, comes under the minister's jurisdiction. Actually, I believe it's in the Act. And so I want to make a case for the province to step up, and I believe the Premier made this an issue during the election last June. But I would like to see, I think the department has a responsibility to put sidewalks in there, so I'm making that request to the minister, and I'd be interested in her response.
Thank you. The Honourable the Minister of Education.
Mr. Chairman, to the member opposite, his memory is great. We did work together on the Elmsdale project, and I, on more than one occasion, commended the member for bringing some of the concerns from the planning team to the House at that time. So we did work well together on that project, and I'm very familiar with the school, with the site, with McMillan Drive, with the deplorable conditions of McMillan Drive, and also the issue of safety. And municipalities are responsible for the paving of the road, and I'm pleased to hear that that may happen. Also responsible for sidewalks. However, the safety of students is our responsibility. And if it's deemed to be unsafe, and that would be an issue that the board would have to deal with, if it's deemed to be unsafe, then there would be steps that the board would take to ensure safety of those students. And I would expect, I can't speak for the board, but I would expect that their action on that would be more like busing rather than sidewalks. But safety is my responsibility, and transportation is the responsibility of the boards. And I'd be prepared to discuss that with the board or with the community, but that would be our position.
Thank you. The Honourable Member for Hanseas.
Well, I'll thank the minister for reiterating the position. I'm not sure if I want to thank her for the position, but what I want to say to the minister is, if you think about the elementary school in Lance, actually, and if you look at the long entrance, which is not as long as McMillan Drive, I'll be willing to admit that. But the school in Lance is right on the number 2 highway. It has a sidewalk that goes down to the number 2 highway, and actually the number 2 highway doesn't have a sidewalk that it goes to. So, but certainly for McMillan Drive, the number 2 highway does have a sidewalk there, and so certainly I think the province could at least work with the municipality, maybe a cost share on that on that sidewalk. I know they're not cheap, but I do worry about the possibility of students being hurt there, and so. I'll certainly hope for a comment from the minister as I sit down, but I'll make that my last comments, and so that my colleagues in the Liberal caucus may get a chance. So,
the Honourable the Minister of Education.
Mr. Chair, to the member opposite, thank you for your questions, and I will, as I have in other occasions, worked with the board and work with the community in the best interest of students. And I recognize what Maple Ridge has, and will remind the member that that was a P3 project, but also that we certainly recognize that safety is priority. So we'll be working on that. Thank you.
Thank you. The Chair will now recognize the honourable member for Richmond.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Ça fait plaisir de poser quelques questions à Ministre de l'Éducation. And I'm sure one day, before too long, Mr. Chair, that I'll be able to ask my questions in French, and the minister will be able to properly have translation, and hopefully our good Minister of Acadian Affairs will be bringing that in very soon, hopefully by the fall session, and make more interesting debate here in the House, I'm sure. Madam Minister, let me start with a local issue right off the start. On Saturday, this past Saturday of the Easter long weekend, I met with a group of parents, the Parents Advisory Committee of the East Richmond Elementary Junior High School. As you know, currently in the community of St. Peter's, there is the old elementary school and as well the old high school that are both being operated for the student population. Grades primary to 4 are in the old elementary school, and grades 5 to 7 are in the old high school. Basically, both of those schools are within eyesight of each other, but the cost of maintaining 2 schools certainly is one that is of great expense to the Strait Regional School Board, and it was why some time ago, actually back in 2003 at least, a commitment was made by your party during the election that there would be an expansion to the elementary school in order to accommodate all of the students under one roof. Last week, the Superintendent of Strait Regional School Board, Mr. Fons Gillis, met with the Parents Advisory Committee and advised them that based on the budget presented to this House, that the planned renovations which were to take place this year have been put on hold. And I'm wondering if the Minister could indicate to me and to the parents and the School Advisory Committee as to why those promised renovations are not taking place this fiscal year.
Thank you. The Honourable, the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, to the member opposite. And I thought in your introductory comments you were suggesting I would have gone through an immersion program, and who knows, that may happen. To be specific with your question about the renovations, and as I've said many times over the last couple of weeks, the commitments that our government made in 2003 with respect to 12 new school projects and 45 renovations and additions projects, that commitment has not changed. In addition to that, the scope of the work for those projects has not changed. The commitment will be met as funds and resources become available. With the resources that were available to this government, it was impossible to move forward on all of the projects that had been scheduled. And so what we did was to look at those projects where tenders had been called and let, and those became priorities for us for 2007-2008. I did have a chance to visit the East Richmond School, had a great tour. The principal was very accommodating, and recognized that there needed to be work done in those schools, and the commitment that had been made and the plan that the Strait Regional School Board had for that was a good plan. So I guess my comment to the member opposite is it is not canceled, it is delayed, and it's delayed because of funding that's available in this particular budget year.
Thank you. The Honourable Member for Richmond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I realize that the Minister did have a tour, and I'm not surprised to hear that she would have found the principal to be very accommodating, and unfortunately he may have been too accommodating because of the fact that there's been this delay. And I'm sure in light of the fact that the principal at the school is a former PC candidate, that probably may have helped in his accommodation of the Minister at the time. But at the end of the day, Madam Minister, the fact is that the community, which has been waiting for some time now for these renovations, is clearly upset. And not only are they upset, again, when one looks, we're talking budget here, we're talking finances, when one looks at the amount of money that's being spent each year by the Strait Regional School Board to maintain 2 schools, just the heating cost to maintain the old high school, which I don't remember what the age was, but I know that the figure that was given to me was anywhere between $200,000 to $300,000 a year is being spent to maintain that old high school with a student population which clearly could be put in with the elementary school once those renovations are complete. So if for no other reason, cost-wise, it just doesn't make sense for your department to delay this project any further, because it's money that certainly could be spent in the classroom rather than being spent on administering a building which the student population doesn't justify, which is why it was suggested that those schools be amalgamated in the first place. For example, Mr. Chair, when I believe when the minister was there to visit, she visited the elementary site, but I'm not sure if she had an opportunity to visit the old high school site, which is actually the older school, and there's now concerns because a student recently was taken out of the school due to some health difficulties, and now there's a round of air quality testing that's taking place in that school, which we're all concerned as to what those results might be. Which may put this situation, in fact, even more, will certainly require it to be dealt with in a much more speedy fashion. And I think the minister hopefully will be open to revisit the decision not to fund that expansion this year in light of those concerns that are raised. But just for example, Mr. Chair, at the old high school, the former oil tank, like so many schools, was buried. And then they figured that it was leaking, so they had to dig it out. When they dug it out, they figured out that there was another oil tank, so they had to go digging to find that other oil tank. And at the end of the day, they had to put in a new above-ground oil tank, brand new tank, set all that up for an old high school, which under the government's own plans will be closed. Had they met the commitment this year, would have been closed in a year and a half. So needless to say, I would hope that the minister would appreciate that. That is valued dollars that our education system needs. And right now, unfortunately, is being spent on infrastructure, which is not going to be there for the long run, based on your department's own plans. So I guess my question is that being the minister's indicated that there's going to be a delay, is their department even in a position right now to give an indication to these communities as to what is Plan B, as far as what is the next scheduled time as to when you expect that these renovations may actually take place?
Thank you. The Honourable the Minister of Education.
Mr. Chair, to the member opposite, as he so accurately described, the recommendation that came from the Strait School Board to accommodate those students in one building was based on program needs, but it was also based on the economies. And we'd like to put our needs of students first, but we also recognize that the financial situation does come into play. So obviously a very good recommendation from the Strait Board, and one that we, as I said, have made a commitment to follow up on. Our position at the department at this time is we know that we have a number of communities that have a number of questions about what's happening to their project, and once we're finished with the budget, if that budget is approved, then our next step is to get out with school boards and into communities so they better understand what has happened with their project, what our projected timeline is for completing that project, and sitting down with boards and school advisory councils, communities, so that they have the accurate information and so they know that their project has not been scrapped, that it has not been changed, but it has been delayed. But that's certainly a commitment that we have made, and we will begin that process once we're finished with the budget.
Thank you. The Honourable the Leader of the Liberal Party.
Mr. Chair, I just want to impress upon the minister where I know some of the renovations in some of the schools that I've heard about was a gymnasium, some were music rooms and that. In this case, what's happening is that this delay is causing a great deal of anxiety in the community. As you know, a number of years ago, Richmond County had 2 high schools. At the time, because of declining enrollments, it was decided that the 2 high schools would be closed and there'd be an amalgamated high school, the Richmond Academy. So right now in Richmond, we have 1 English language high school. That's it. We used to have 2, we now have 1. Parents in the St. Peter's area are now fearing that any delay on this project means that there is a bigger plan to start changing around where these students are going to be attending school. Now, whether this is true or untrue, I certainly hope it isn't, but I can tell you that it's caused great anxiety amongst the community, and I would hope that the minister would keep that in mind. It's not just a matter of the community saying we want a new gym or we want a bigger music room or we want a bigger auditorium. This is about the survival of the school. It's about the survival of those those junior high students remaining in that community. And as a result, when we met on Saturday, there were a number of different rumors that had already started in the community. But needless to say, it was creating a great level of anxiety, and that's why this is a type of project that just cannot be delayed any longer. It's so that the community can clearly know that the investment is going to be made to keep those students in that community under one roof, under one administration, and be able to continue as a thriving school community. And I hope that the Minister will keep that in mind as she moves forward, especially looking at the specific schools. And I would hope that you would consider the St. Peter's and the East Richmond Elementary situation a unique situation, because it's not just asking for a new gym or auditorium, as I've mentioned. This is about keeping the students in that community under one roof. And unless the government moves on that quickly, the level of anxiety is going to heighten, and I fear that there's going to be negative repercussions all around for the community, and certainly for us as as parliamentarians, in that the commitment was made, and the community now is very upset that that commitment appears that it's not going to be kept. And just as an aside to that, Mr. Chair, I think it's important for the Minister to understand as well, the Strait Regional School Board just can't cut anymore. And that was my message to the parents when I met with them, is that we have made the cuts. We have closed the schools. We've amalgamated schools. We've made the tough decisions. The communities have accepted those tough decisions. And I'm sure the Minister will probably recognize that there's many boards that haven't made those tough decisions. And yet we have done that in the Strait Board. And it hasn't been easy on communities. And I'm sure that the Minister of Transportation, being from that board, knows exactly the tough decisions that were made. And at that, his county, I don't believe, has probably seen the population drop that we've seen in our areas. And so it's essential that communities be given a clear message from government that they are going to make the investments to keep those students in those communities, and make sure that this is not something that's going to be delayed such to a point that all of a sudden new plans are going to be drafted up as to where these students may be housed in the coming years. So I leave that issue with the Minister, and certainly we'll probably be raising it again with her in the next few days, and again to highlight the anxiety level that's there amongst the community. And I think they've been very patient. They showed me the plans for the new school and everything, so all they're waiting for now is the green light from your department, and they're ready to go, and the community has certainly bought into it. Mr. Chair, I'd also, in speaking with a number of parents and some representatives from the Conseil scolaire acadien provincial, they were very anxious to know as to what the department's position is on the proposed construction of a new French language high school here in the metro area, more specifically, I believe, targeted for the Bedford-Sackville area. Currently, the Acadian school at École Beaujolais in Dartmouth is experiencing great success, which is becoming a bit of a concern because of the fact that students are being housed in portables, which is certainly not a favored position to be in. And what is happening, unfortunately, is because of this, many parents are turning to the English system to place their kids due to the fact that they do not want to see them in overcrowded classes at École Beaujolais. Based on some of the statements made by your Deputy Minister not long ago about the failings of the government provincially to meet some of the bilingual targets set by the federal government, needless to say, this is an opportunity for the government to make an investment to make sure that students who wish to study in the French language are given the opportunity to do so here in Metro. And I believe the amount of students that are registering is a sign of great success. But with that success comes some of the challenges in the need for more schools to accommodate the student population. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'm wondering if the Minister could just indicate what the status of that project is and when she expects that that project may be given the green light to move forward.
Thank you. The Honourable, the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and if I could remind the House that we recognize the importance of providing facilities to accommodate our French first language population, our Acadian population. And to that end, we have worked closely with CSAP as they identified areas of population and where the needs for facilities existed. I met with the CSAP on January 26th of this year, and discussed many concerns and many issues, and it was a great learning experience for me. One of the things that was identified by that board at that time was the need to have a facility to accommodate their high school population. And recognizing that Beaubassin was doing a very good job, and we were encouraging and attracting a lot of students to our elementary schools. That translates into a population moving into the junior, senior high school. And they did not have the facility to do that. So the commitment that I made at that time was to work with CSAP to provide a facility based on information that they were sharing with us to accommodate that population, and have had several pieces of correspondence and several meetings with parents and other community groups from both sides of the harbor as to where a new school should be built to accommodate that population. And have gone back to the board to say, we're committed to accommodating your population. Please give us some direction as to where you believe that that building should be built. And once that is finalized, and once the French communities are happy with that, or at least are understanding of the decision of the board, then we would begin immediately to look at site selection and design and move forward with construction. So we are on top of that. We recognize it. We recognize my statistics from 2005-06 is that we have just over 4,000 students in CSAP schools, and we want that to grow. And we don't want students or parents to feel that their students can't continue in their first language through to the end of grade 12. So we're committed to that. We want to make sure that happens. And at this point, as I said, we're looking at finalizing with the CSAP the general location of that school, and then work towards finding a site. At this point, it looks like there would be a high school on both sides of the harbor, but once we get the clearance from them, we will start the site selection.
Thank you. The Honourable, the Leader of the Liberal Party.
Well, I guess in that, Mr. Chair, I'm wondering if the Minister could indicate, because when she's saying she's looking for the French Acadian community to indicate where they'd like the school to be, but she's also been in talks with CSAP, I guess, what does it come down to? And I guess if we're waiting for parents to all agree, then we're going to be here for quite some time, and I don't think any of us are going to live long enough to see the school. I guess the question is, my understanding is the CSAP has indicated they wish the new school to be built in the Bedford-Sackville area. I believe that's already been communicated to the Minister as the directive from the elected board. Based on that, I'm curious if that is the case, if she can confirm that, why is there a need for further discussion if the elected members of the Acadian board have already indicated to your department where they believe that that school, new high school, should be constructed?
Thank you. The Honourable, the Minister of Education.
Mr. Chair, to the member opposite, yes, indeed, the CSAP did indicate to our department that their preference, based on the statistics that they had, were that the need for that new facility was on the Halifax side of the harbour. A number of parents from the Carrefour community were concerned about what that might do to their ability to deliver a high school program in their school, and would that take away that critical mass that they need in order to deliver options for students. My response back to the parents was to go back to their board, make sure their board fully understood what their concerns were about that impact. Parents in that community were suggesting that perhaps they had not had an opportunity to be heard by CSAP, and so I'm prepared to let that happen at the board level. If that may or may not change the board's position, but at least those parents will have had an opportunity to be heard, and they need to be heard by the board. Information that the board gave to us was that they had done that work, but this just provides an opportunity for those parents to feel that they have been heard, and that the impact it has on Carrefour is one of the things that the board had considered. It has not changed what the board came to me or to our department with as a request for a high school on this side of the harbour, but I want to make sure that that consultation and the opportunity to be heard has been provided to all parents before we move forward.
Thank you. The Honourable, the Leader of the Liberal Party.
You know, I guess one can never accuse a minister of wanting more consultation, I can tell you, Minister, if that's the approach with this school, you may be finding yourself in a similar situation with all other proposed new schools in this province, because site selection and getting parents to agree on schools is something that's next to impossible, and I don't envy the task that is faced by school boards in trying to make such decisions. So, you know, I guess looking at it quickly, this may be a good approach, but I fear this may come back to haunt you in the future when other schools are going to be proposed. But that being the case, what time frame have you set then to allow this consultation to take place and then to accept a final selection as final site or a general location, I should say, from the Acadian School Board on this issue?
Thank you. The Honourable the Minister of Education.
Mr. Chair, to the member opposite, the first opportunity I had to communicate with the parents was at the end of January, right after the board meeting with CSAP. And so there have been a number of pieces of correspondence and dialogue back and forth between the board and my office, between the parents and my office. And I'm prepared to, if there's not quick resolution to that, I'm prepared to say that I need a letter from the board to confirm and reaffirm their location. I would want that by the end of this school year so we can begin the site selection process.
Thank you. The Honourable the Leader of the Liberal Party.
Madam Minister, is it then safe to assume that we should anticipate seeing in the next budget for 07-08 that there's actually going to be, or I should say 08 or 09, that there's going to be a commitment in that budget for the construction of a new French language Acadian high school here in the metro area?
Thank you. The Honourable the Minister of Education.
Mr. Chairman, to the member opposite, the planning of a new school takes on many different stages, and the first one is identifying a site. What I would be looking for is for that site selection to be taking place during the 07-08 year, and then we would be going into design. We would expect that there would be some dollars in the next budget to support the design process, but there would be a definite date as to when that school should be opened, announced at the time of the design work.
Thank you. The Honourable the Leader of the Liberal Party.
Does the Minister have any proposed time frame as to when that design work would be started and when she would expect that to be completed?
Thank you. The Honourable the Minister of Education.
Mr. Chair, to the member opposite, we do move in stages, and once the site has been selected, then we would be able to move into the design work. We would expect the design work to take a period of probably 4 to 6 months. It does involve bringing the community together to sit down with the architects and with the school board staff and look at how we can best design a building to fit on whatever site is chosen. So that's why choosing the site is important, because it will dictate to some degree the design of the building. And once the design tender has been called and awarded, we're looking at between a 12 to 14-month construction period. So I guess if you do the math and you start that now, you are looking at a school in the year 2009.
Thank you. The Honourable the Leader of the Liberal Party.
And Minister, I hope you'll appreciate in this circumstance, as I mentioned East Richmond and the importance of that project and the need to get that done, I'm sure you'll appreciate that every year that goes by, parents are basically having to make the difficult decision of taking their children from the Acadian French program and putting them into the English program because due to the lack of resources available for them to continue their studies into high school. So for us as an Acadian community, this goes down to assimilation. It goes down to the challenges that face parents and students in being able to maintain their studies in the French language. So I do hope that the Minister will be sensitive to that matter. I know all schools are important in this province, but when it comes down to language rights and the abilities of a minority to preserve their language, I would hope that the government would give particular attention to that matter and that all efforts to see the construction of that new school and those resources being made available would be done. Just in closing, Mr. Chair, I know I have a limited amount of time, but the question that was put to me during my meeting with the parents on Saturday was, who determines what schools are going to be funded in the budget? So my question to the Minister is, the list of schools that we saw included in the budget document, are those decided by your department, or do those go to Treasury and Policy Board or through any other government departments before being decided?
Thank you. The Honourable the Minister of Education.
Mr. Chair, to the member opposite, the decisions as to when a new school is needed and when new renovations are needed are based on information that comes from the boards and goes to a school capital construction committee. And that school capital construction committee will identify and recommend to me or to the minister what the priorities are for schools under new construction or renovations, additions. And those decisions are a part of that school capital construction committee report, which I would then take on to Cabinet for approval.
The Honourable, the Leader of the Liberal Party.
Could the minister indicate whether Cabinet in this year's budget has varied at all the lists that you initially provided as a recommendation from your department before it arrived to Cabinet?
Thank you. The Honourable, the Minister of Education.
Mr. Chair, to the member opposite, the list that was used this year to determine where we would move in our capital construction is the 2003 list that was approved in 2003. There have been no changes to that. There have, as I said earlier, the list of 12 new schools and 45 additions renovations were approved in 2003, and it was that list that went to Cabinet with a status of where we were with those projects and which ones should be worked on in order to complete that. So that was the process that was used.
Thank you. The Honourable, the Leader of the Liberal Party.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And with a few, I notice I have a few more minutes. I noted that in the Strait area that the Mayor of Port Hawkesbury indicated great concern with the delay in the proposed renovations to the Sarek school as well. And I'm wondering if the Minister could indicate what the status of the renovations to that school are, being they've been delayed apparently for a year as well. What is the plan proposal for that school's renovations as well?
Thank you. The Honourable, the Minister of Education.
Mr. Chairman, to member opposite, Sarek is another one of those schools that was on that list back in 2003, and was again one of those schools that renovations would be over a number of years, different phases to the project. And it's my understanding that some equipment has been purchased for installation, and the installation has not taken place. There were no dollars in this particular year's budget to do that. What I would say to Sarek and to East Richmond and to any other school is that once the budget is approved and we're ready to move forward, we will begin to work with school boards and communities to try to resolve and address some of their outstanding and I guess to use your words, I would be sensitive to some of those issues that have to be resolved.
Thank you. The Honourable, the Leader of the Liberal Party.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair and Madam Minister. And let me just add this one last item of sensitivity to your list of concerns. When we did meet with the Parent Advisory Group in St. Peter's on Saturday, the principal of the school, which you've met, actually informed the group that he has purchased a number of equipment, desks, and other materials for the expansion of the elementary school that is going to be arriving shortly, and now faces the challenge of wondering where he's going to put all that stuff, knowing that the proposed expansion has been delayed. So if for no other reason, I'm sure that the minister would not want to see the Strait Regional School Board having to rent out some sort of storage space for the new equipment for the East Richmond Elementary School, and would hope that the minister, for all the reasons I've outlined in my few minutes, would certainly look to moving this project forward as soon as possible, both for the community and for all the other practical concerns that I've raised as well. And with that, Mr. Chair, I want to thank the Minister and her staff for their time today.
Thank you. The Chair will recognize the Honourable Minister to close debate on her estimates if she so wished to make final comments.
Yes, Mr. Chair, to you and to the members of the House, I appreciate the opportunity to have had, I think it's probably about 10 hours to respond to the estimates, and appreciate the questions that have been raised. They are important to the members, and they are important to me, and they are important to the communities that we serve. And I would hope that the responses have answered some of the questions for all of those people, and that the few that perhaps did not get a complete answer, we've made a commitment to get back and follow that up with additional information. But again, I would repeat, it is a budget that we believe is good for education, good for students, and good for communities. We recognize that there's always a list, a to-do list, and you would like to do more. However, with the resources that we have, we believe that we have been able to continue to provide quality programming in all of our schools, and that it would be with no program cuts and with no layoffs. So having said that, be it resolved that a sum not exceeding $1.188445 million be granted to the Lieutenant Governor to defray expenses in respect of the Department of Education pursuant to estimates, and be it resolved that the sum not exceeding $250,805,000 be granted to the Lieutenant Governor to defray expenses in respect of assistance to universities, Department of Education pursuant to estimates. So move.
Thank you. Shall the resolution E4 and E5 stand? Stand. Thank you. The Honourable, the Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I call for the estimates for the Department of Transportation Public Works.
Thank you. The estimates for the Department of Transportation and Public Works. Maybe we'll allow just a few minutes for the minister's staff to change seats. The committee will recess for a couple of minutes. Order. The chair will now recognize the Honourable, the Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I appreciate this opportunity to open the estimate debate for the Department of Transportation and Public Works. And I am pleased to report on work and estimates for a number of other portfolios, namely Treasury and Policy Board, the Sydney Steel Corporation Act, including the Sydney Tar Ponds and Gaelic initiatives. Before I begin my comments today, I would like to introduce the staff who are accompanying me today in the House. They are Doug Stewart, who is the Chief Engineer of Highway Programs, and Jane Fraser, the Director of Finance for the Department of Transportation and Public Works. I also have some staff in the gallery who will provide additional information if needed. They are David Darrow, the Deputy Minister of Transportation and Public Works, Greg Lusk, Executive Director of Public Works, and Dan Davis, Director of Communications, and I also see Lewis McKinnon, Acting CEO of Gaelic Initiatives. I see John Traves, President of Sydney Tar Ponds, Margaret McDonald, Treasury and Policy Board, and I'm pleased that these folks have the opportunity to spend some time with us. And Mr. Chairman, first of all, I want to express my appreciation to everyone in the department who has spent so much time in the preparation of the estimates. And there's a lot of work that's gone on in the Johnson building and elsewhere within the department, as well as the work that has been carried out by folks at the Sydney Tar Ponds and Sydney Steel, Gaelic Initiatives, and Treasury and Policy Board. The Department of Transportation and Public Works is an assembly of more than 2,000 hard-working and talented people serving this province from end to end. Without a doubt, the members of this committee know the good work that they do and the commitment they show, no matter how difficult the task. And I would want at this point, Mr. Chair, to express my appreciation to members of the House who on a regular basis come up to me and commend the staff of the Department of Transportation and Public Works for the work that they do. And I want that to be on the record because you meet with them, they're the people in the front lines, and for you to come back with those positive comments is something that I want to put on the record. They do an outstanding job in so many areas, including road construction, road maintenance, road safety, public safety communications, accommodations, building maintenance, and construction, just to name a few. It is clearly a department with a wide variety of roles, and it plays those roles well on behalf and for all Nova Scotians. The department has a mandate to serve a diverse base of clients consisting of the general public, other provincial Crown government departments, and agencies of the Crown. The mission of the Transportation and Public Works is delivering quality public infrastructure for Nova Scotia. We construct, maintain, and manage provincial highways, buildings, and public infrastructure to provide the hardware of our society, to provide built capital that supports sustainable economic growth and social well-being, to lay the route to future prosperity for future generations. It is the department's responsibility to develop and implement policies relating to air, marine, rail, and road transport systems. We look forward to a number of exciting opportunities this year at Transportation and Public Works. We are the lead department for the Atlantic Gateway, and we will take significant steps toward this, forward this year to seize the opportunity to establish the Atlantic Gateway for Nova Scotia. Nova Scotia's potential as an international gateway includes exponential growth in container traffic and significant growth opportunities in international air passenger and cargo traffic handling and in the cruise ship industry. The department's priorities with regard to the Atlantic Gateway in 07-08 are to continue to work with key stakeholders in advance and to advance Nova Scotia's position as a North American gateway for goods and passengers. Pursue with the federal government a dedicated federal funding program for gateway-related projects and initiatives, and continue to work in partnership with the other Atlantic provinces, Transport Canada, and the Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency to develop a broadly based Atlantic Gateway strategy to take advantage of this opportunity to benefit each of the 4 provinces and, of course, Canada. And work with local ports to help build awareness of Nova Scotia as a gateway for goods and passengers by participating in trade missions and marketing events, and to work with the airports that provide an important opening to Nova Scotia for both passenger and cargo markets. We have budgeted $1 million to develop and implement an aggressive gateway communications and marketing strategy, carry out in-depth research into gateway opportunities, including container traffic, air cargo, cruise ship home porting, and short sea shipping, to develop the capacity to track key gateway traffic activity in Nova Scotia. The department will create greater awareness of Nova Scotia's international transportation gateway assets, both at home and abroad. It will work to maximize the province's full potential as a strategic international transportation gateway. Nova Scotia's development as a strategic international marine and air gateway will benefit the province, the Atlantic region, and the country as a whole. Members of the Committee on Supply should now be well aware of the department's estimated road and bridge multi-billion-dollar infrastructure deficit. While the province's capital funding is more than 3 times the amount in 1999, it is still not enough to manage the growing deficit. That's why Transportation and Public Works is excited by the new infrastructure-related funding programs announced in the recent federal budget. Nova Scotia's entitlement under the programs is expected to total several $100 million over the course of the next 7 years. The programs include the Building Canada program, the Gateways and Borders Crossing Fund, and the Equal Per Jurisdiction Funding Program, and the P3 Projects Fund. Mr. Chairman, Nova Scotia and other provinces and territories have lobbied the Government of Canada for long-term, stable and predictable infrastructure funding for many years. Up until the recent federal budget, these appeals have fallen on deaf ears. These new funding programs will go a long way toward enabling Nova Scotia to achieve its full potential as an international transportation gateway and facilitating much-needed improvements to the province's highway infrastructure. The department is looking forward to learning more about program parameters and being able to put in place the agreements and protocols necessary to allow cost-shared projects to proceed as quickly as possible. Mr. Chairman, this year, the Nova Scotia government will spend $2.2 million more on roads than it collects in gas revenues and Registry of Motor Vehicles revenues to maintain and improve Nova Scotia's highways, roads, and bridges. Overall, Transportation and Public Works capital budget for 07-08 is about $179 million. This includes close to $145 million for highways and another $34 million for capital construction on buildings. Mr. Chairman, the department's capital budget is the second largest in the province's history. We will see more twinned highways and better secondary highways across Nova Scotia. Indeed, we are well on the way to meeting our commitment to pave 2,000 kilometers over 4 years. The money available this year will allow us to continue with the twinning of 5.5 kilometers of Highway 101 between Falmouth and Hansport. We'll also continue to work in the twinning of a 4-kilometer stretch of Highway 104 between New Glasgow and Sutherlands River. The department will be upgrading and repaving sections on a number of important tourist routes, including 8 kilometers on Route 333, the Peggy's Cove Road, and another 10.5 kilometers on the Cabot Trail. The amount of money maintenance work carried out on rural roads is increasing in 07-08 due to a $2.5 million increase over last year's budget. This year's investment is $20 million. The road improvement money will go to asphalt patching, ditching and graveling, shoulder repairs, guardrails, and brush cutting. This year's investment meets the commitment made in 03-04 to increase the RIM to $20 million by the year 08. These projects are largely tendered, leading to greater cost efficiencies for taxpayers and first-rate work for residents. We're also receiving an additional $625,000 in funding for the 4 R's: rehabilitation, restoration, reconstruction, and resurfacing. This will bring the total non-tangible capital assets investment in this 4-year program to $2.5 million. The funding is used to carry out a variety of similar projects, including intersection improvements and signals, repaving of roads less than 2 kilometers in length, and small bridge replacement and repairs. This is the 5th year of a program to replace our aging steel truss bridges. Expenditures for 07-08 are estimated to be $5 million, largely to replace 6 bridges. The program will be extended for another 3 years, beginning in 08-09. One of the most important roles in Transportation and Public Works is to provide a provincial highway system that is safe for all road users. Our budget for 07-08 designates $916,000 to our road safety program, and $350,000 of that is going to social marketing initiatives. My department will focus on road safety-related projects to influence smarter choices by Nova Scotians, be they drivers, pedestrians, or cyclists. We will examine the attitudes and behaviors toward road safety and set out to educate road users and convince them to make good decisions every time. The department will continue to develop and launch campaigns targeting risk-taking young drivers. The objective is to make the issue of speeding and impaired driving important enough to young drivers so that they will take action. We're working with the Registry of Motor Vehicles, the Department of Justice, Health Promotion and Protection to bring the Alcohol Ignition Interlock program online this year. The department will work with the road safety partners to promote safe road use in these and other programs. We will also take action to ensure that our crosswalks are safe. I've directed my department to work with Halifax Regional Municipality to create a joint working group to improve crosswalk safety. The working group will bring forward the best approaches on this serious issue to the municipality and the province. We will also seek input from other municipal units as well, Mr. Chair. Our Public Works Division is responsible for providing services, including building design and construction, building services and operations, and accommodations for government departments, agencies, boards, and commissions. It is also responsible for the cooperative delivery and management of government-wide information technology and telecommunications services, including the management of province-wide mobile radio programs for public safety and public works agencies at all levels of government, as well as government postal services. This vital government service is responsible for the care and operation of 2,200 structures across Nova Scotia, including 25 provincial buildings and courthouses. It manages 16 industrial parks and 10 water utilities. Public Works also builds, upgrades, and maintains schools and special projects such as continuing care homes, justice centres, other provincial facilities, and service buildings for government departments and agencies. In this fiscal year, about $34 million is allocated for renovations to government buildings and new construction projects. Work this year includes the continuation of the Lunenburg Provincial Building, Government House, Lunenburg Justice Centre, and Yarmouth Justice Centre. Public Works is responsible for the delivery of new schools and major school renovation projects that are included in the Department of Education's capital program. We will continue working with our colleagues in education to design and construct high-quality projects that will address the current infrastructure needs and provide the setting for the delivery of high-quality education for future generations. In 2007-2008, Public Works aims to reach a consensus with the Halifax Regional Municipality regarding the redevelopment of various public lands in Metro Halifax. We will undertake negotiations with HRM for the swap of strategic properties required by each of the key developments. Our Engineering, Design and Construction Division will continue to meet the guidelines of the government's energy strategy for buildings by performing work to existing buildings to decrease energy consumption and to continue to work toward the goal of achieving 25% better than the model National Energy Code for all new building construction. It will also continue to manage the design and construction of new schools and school renovation projects for the Department of Education. It will work to obtain leadership in energy and environmental design certification on at least 50% of new buildings. Public Works will also work to continue to raise its leasing standards to ensure that the buildings we lease are environmentally friendly. We're continuing our work to create a barrier-free access to government and public buildings. The province is committed to ensuring persons with disabilities benefit equally from services offered to the general public within government-owned and leased properties. Transportation and Public Works requires all new buildings and new leases to be barrier-free and incorporates barrier-free design into renovations of existing buildings whenever possible. Public Works provides common services to government users, everything from postal services to accommodation services to government-wide provision of information technology and telecommunications service. Staff in this division manage accommodations for all departments, boards, agencies, and commissions. They sell surplus land and manage inventory. Public Works operates the largest data center and information network in Nova Scotia. Staff work to protect our computers from outside attacks and manage the thousands upon thousands of emails that flow in and out of government each day. Department staff handle government-wide contracts for telecommunications, negotiate tendered agreements for local and long-distance telephone service, and data and cell phone service. Public Works delivers cutting-edge emergency and field radio services to 14,000 government and emergency first responders. Through the Public Safety and Field Communications Office, staff work to enhance public safety and responses to emergencies. They are responsible for the trunked mobile radio system. The first-class radio communications system links all emergency services in the provinces, police to EMO, staff to volunteer firefighters, and many others. Environmental remediation is an important part of the Public Works portfolio. It involves routine work for site management such as demolitions, disposals, and cleanups. Our Environmental Services Division is in charge of such large projects as returning Boat Harbour to a tidal estuary and the ongoing monitoring at 5 Island Lake. As Minister responsible for Sydney Tar Ponds Agency, I was very pleased to announce in January that both the federal and provincial governments approved the cleanup of tar ponds and coke oven sites. The province has $120 million committed to the important project, and the work has already begun. 2 new agencies have taken over the role of Cisco and Sydney Environmental Resources Limited. Nova Scotia Lands and Harbourside Commercial Park are now in operation. Harbourside Commercial Park is managing the land that has been remediated on the former Cisco steel mill site, as well as the related buildings and leases. It will become a self-sufficient corporation, making a positive impact on economic development in the local area. Harbourside currently has 13 tenants on site. Nova Scotia Lands Incorporated is managing the completion of the environmental remediation of the Cisco property, and as parts of the site are remediated, they will be transferred to the commercial park. Once the remediation of the Cisco site is complete, Nova Scotia Lands will use the expertise it has developed to continue remediation activities on former Cisco properties and other potential lands as funding becomes available. I'd like to speak for a few moments about initiatives at Treasury and Policy Board. Better regulation continues to be a major priority. The province continues to be committed to creating simpler, more effective regulation that will cut time and expenses for business. The Better Regulation Initiative is working to improve the way laws are designed, communicated, and enforced in Nova Scotia, ultimately improving the competitiveness of our business. We will continue on the 2006 pledge to reduce the paperwork burden associated with regulatory requirements by 20% in 2010, or by 2010. In addition to this commitment, by 2010, all departments will meet a standard of no more than 10 business days to process licenses, permits, and approvals. Exceptions to this 10-day commitment on wait times will only be permitted where an alternate service standard has been approved by Executive Council and posted for public information. As an interim step, by 2008, the wait times associated with 50% of all provincial licenses, permits, and approvals will be 10 days or less, and service guarantees will be introduced for several types of licenses, permits, or approvals. The Governance and Accountability Initiative to strengthen policies and procedures among third-party entities also continues to be a priority. TPB has now developed corporate orientation materials for members of government's boards. These materials were introduced at a rollout event in February, which included approximately 80 board chairs and CEOs. To date, Treasury and Policy Board staff have conducted 6 information presentations with individual boards to familiarize them with these orientation materials, and 5 more presentations are scheduled in the coming weeks. I also want to take a moment to note that Treasury and Policy Board has initiated a new approach to the government business plan to provide a more directional, higher-level discussion of the government's vision for a new Nova Scotia. The 07-08 business plan provides highlights of the government's current business, along with our longer-term priorities toward our vision. This type of discussion better reflects the government's move from simply getting an annual plan to creating a lasting path for the future of Nova Scotia. As Minister responsible for Gaelic Affairs, I am pleased to tell you that the Office of Gaelic Affairs will pursue the following initiatives in its first year of inception: the promotion of Gaelic language and culture throughout the month of May, which has been designated by the Gaelic community of the province as Gaelic Awareness Month; the establishment of a website and ready access for the office, providing valuable information and links to members of the community and public; funding support for community-based initiatives that focus on Gaelic language and culture development; Gaelic Studies curriculum for grades 3 to 9, led by the Department of Education with cooperation from the Office of Gaelic Affairs; English Gaelic boundary signs to be erected this summer in a number of the traditionally Gaelic-speaking areas of the province; and last but not least, Mr. Chairman, a new Office of Gaelic Affairs is soon to open in Antigonish. I am pleased to report that the 2007-08 budget earmarked $450,000 for activities that will help develop Gaelic heritage across the province. With those opening remarks, Mr. Chair, I look forward to the questions and discussions that will occur over the next number of hours.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. The chair will now recognize the honourable member for Pictou West.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I feel something like the movie, I think it's called Girl Interrupted. Well, I feel like Member Interrupted, because I know just in about 5 minutes' time we're going to go to late debate, but at least we'll get started here with a few opening comments or some questions. I guess unlike the Minister, I don't have a prepared text, but I certainly do have some questions I'm going to be asking of the Minister. But first of all, I just want to say that I've been quite pleased with my cooperation that I've received from the Minister's Department, both at the provincial level and at the local riding level in Pictou County. I've had the opportunity to work with Area Manager Troy Webb, and I've had good cooperation from him over the years, and also with operations supervisors like Dave English and Bernie McDonald and Locke Woolley and John McAllister. I guess those would be the 4 in my particular riding. But generally it's been good. It's been the cooperation I certainly appreciate at all levels within the department. So I guess enough for the kudos, and I'll start now with some questions. But I guess start off, Mr. Chair, with asking the Minister about the infrastructure deficit that he referenced. As you know, it's probably over $4 billion right now in Nova Scotia. It was $3.5 billion in 2001 when the 10-year study was done, and unfortunately it's getting larger and rather than smaller. It's getting worse rather than better. And I guess in light of your government's promise last year, Mr. Minister, with the I guess the program of 2,000 kilometers of new paving, I guess it was called the largest repaving project in 40 years in this province. And, you know, it looks to me like our infrastructure deficit is not only increasing, but I look at the budget estimates, I think it's on page 1.11, where it talks about the capital budget for this fiscal year. and I notice it's actually gone down as compared to last year. And so I guess my first question, is in light of the the infrastructure deficit, in light of the promise to have the largest repaving project in 40 years, and I see that capital budget has gone from about $225 million roughly for roads and bridges down this year to $155 million, I think. So it's about a $70 million drop the way I interpret it. And so I just would like to know, in light of those facts, why is it that we're spending less on roads in spite of the promises, or in spite of the infrastructure deficit, and in spite of many, many unacceptable roads out there? So I'm going to ask that first question to the Minister.
Thank you. The Honourable, the Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I'll try to be concise so we can answer the question before 6. Actually, the estimate forecast from last year to this is 176 million. This year, 145. So if you look at the numbers from that perspective, that's where we're going. Certainly, the challenge of the infrastructure deficit is very, very significant. However, as I indicated in my opening remarks, we have seen in this year's federal budget an allocation of money from the Government of Canada that will allow us to make some very significant strides with respect to addressing the infrastructure deficit in this province. We are currently in the process of redefining that deficit and we'll be coming forward with new figures. But for the first time, the Government of Canada has come forward with a significant amount of money that will allow us to vigorously attack that deficit over the period of the next 7 years.
Thank you. The Honourable Member from Pictou West.
Well, maybe if I could refer the Minister then to page 11. While it's true you say the estimate is 176 million, but in actual fact, last year almost 225 million was spent on roads and bridges in this province, and this year it's $70 million less. It's down to 155 million approximately. Why such a large discrepancy? If last year we spent 225 million, this year we're only spending 155 million. Why the difference?
Thank you. The Honourable, the Minister.